I'm Harrison.
And I'm Ameer, and we believe that one of life's most valuable assets is the gift of conversation.
In the midst of life, sometimes we forget the true power of a deep, meaningful conversation.
So take a breath, come join us,
and let's talk about life. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk About Life podcast. My name is Harrison King.
And my name's Ameer Corro.
And we're back with another episode, and we are going to talk about, we've just made a decision to talk about decisions. How's that?
Yeah, spontaneous one. That.
Ameer just is making it in the midst of a big decision. I don't know if you want to share or not, but that's kind of what was making us talk about that. And I think it's a good one to talk about because life is just basically full of decisions. So go for it.
Yeah, definitely. So, hello, dear viewers. I'm happy to be with y'all again. Basically, what's been happening? So last week when Harrison and I recorded, last week's podcast, I recently heard back from a school that I applied to, and this was like my dream school to go to, and they let me know that they were giving me a full tuition scholarship. So crazy
applause track
and stuff.
Applause track.
thank you thank you. And lately this last week I've just been like in the midst of deciding, like, should I go, because there's certain caveats to this decision. Will I be upsetting my career momentum? Will I be kind of deviating from the path that I've set myself on so far? But today has kind of just been a day of revelations and a day of kind of introspection and figuring it out. I made a video last week about like, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I think today I'm kind of settling into it. I had a talk with my therapist today, so I'm kind of just coming fresh off the press from that, like 2 hours ago. Fresh off the press, so I'm in a pretty good head state. I'm still navigating it, but it's been teaching me a lot. And the first thing that I've learned from this experience is that uncertainty is the way forward. Uncertainty is the way forward. Uncertainty is inevitable in every decision that we face in life. If we're looking for certainty, ultimately we're never going to move, right? And so it's a matter of being able to be comfortable and being confident in that uncertainty and being like, okay, yeah, uncertainty is the only certainty that I have at this point. So, leaping headfirst into it with faith. I think also another thing that I heard kind of, today in my appointment with a therapist is that all crossroads are really just a decision of abundance, right? If you go one way, you're going to be blessed. If you go another way, you're going to be blessed. When it comes to lots of life decisions, it's not that there's one crazy good decision and there's one horrible decision, because if it were that case, then it would be an easy decision. But really, all hard decisions come from different, both good and bad options, right? This is good in some way, this one's good in some ways, but it kind of like, it's all even, right? That's what makes it difficult. And kind of recognizing that at that point, in this situation, there's hard decisions, of course, that aren't that good, but in this situation, it's a decision of abundance. So not being scared to, step in any given direction. Most decisions aren't, like closed door decisions, right? If you go through, it's a revolving door. You can go back out if you don't want to.
Right.
Most decisions in life are like that, and yeah, those are kind of the things that I've been learning through this. It's just a lot of, settling into being comfortable with uncertainty. You get what I mean?
Yeah. How many times throughout this have you like tried to focus on like your gut feeling? Because that's like a thing that can sometimes be very prominent, but sometimes it's hard to find. And what have you found throughout this process?
Glad you asked that. Today was actually kind of the day for that. My therapist, she guided me through like this one, like just mindful, like present body activity experience thing. And basically what I learned today is like every cell in our body, like our body, our gut, just like our nervous system, just us, we have an inbuilt knowing. There's a reason why people say trust your gut, or it's in my heart, right? It's in our body. Our body knows. And sometimes our mind gets in the way of making that decision by overthinking and trying to layer and judge and like all these different things. But really the body knows, right? If we're able to be in alignment with that, then, then we end up making decisions in alignment with the deepest, most innate part of ourselves, right? And so like basically there's this one exercise where she just had me like stand up on my 2 feet, and just like close my eyes and breathe and just ground myself, feel the floor, right? Feel my body, feel aligned. and basically she would ask me questions, innocuous questions. And one thing I noticed, like my body just like habitually, like instinctively leans forward or leans back. So she'd ask me like, do you like peanut butter? I would slowly lean forward, right? Or well, I have my peanut-free peanut butter. Sorry, because I'm allergic. Or like,
I
do
was
you
like,
like?
I don't know if you're having peanut butter
Yeah,
there,
exactly
buddy.
right.
What
We
are you
talked about this, right? Right. But then she'd ask like innocuous questions, like, "Do you like strawberries?" And then I would lean forward. Do you like paying your taxes?
Right.
You know. And it was really interesting to observe because I wasn't thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I was just kind of present in my body, and my body was answering. And so, kind of like as she was guiding me through these questions, she was asking me like, do you want to stay in Vancouver? Do you want to stay where you currently are? Because that was like one of the choices,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there was just a natural aversion, but like I can sense my mind wanting to rationalize and being like, yo, no, you're already here. This is what you're doing. What This is the status quo. But then
Right.
realizing that that's actually not what my body, right, aligned with like me, like, or not necessarily me, but like, this part of myself acting from a heart-centered place. That's not actually what I truly want. And I knew at that point I wasn't BSing myself either. Like it
Right.
felt true. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, you're right. And so after asking me those questions, I finally came to the conclusion that, both the two options that I was looking at, because there were three,
Mm-hmm.
the two options that I was looking at, ultimately I wasn't giving up any of them. I could still have them both, just at different times. Right. And so
Okay.
kind of like that's what gave me the confidence to, kind of step forward into this decision with school. It's scary, but kind of upsetting the status quo
Mm-hmm.
is the way forward. The uncertainty of that, the fear of that is part of the package. And I think that's part of the learning and the growing experience. The fear and the uncertainty that comes along with things is ultimately what makes us grow. And that, friends, is my monologue.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that's something that like your gut feeling is a real thing, right? So your gut and brain are connected through this thing called the vagus nerve. Like it's a legit biological thing, right? And just through like the foods you eat will affect your mental state. They can cause, like brain fog and all these things because of that connection. And there's also this, the trust your gut feeling. It's part of that because your body is reacting. It's a part of your nervous system, right? And that's where that feeling is held. And so it happens. But I think like this happened to me recently, and I had this feeling, and then I was like, nah, like that's wrong. Like this is it's okay, it's okay. And I did it, and like my gut was right. You know what I mean? Like I think it happens a lot. How do you think you personally go about going between like this is what I think is right, this is what I feel is right, which one is correct? Sometimes you do need to go with what your brain's telling you or use it. Like how are you navigating that, or how have you in the past?
That's a really good question. Oh, dude. That is exactly the question that I'm trying to figure out myself. Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do I navigate this thing? And to be
Right.
honest with you, I don't have an answer. It's contextual.
Yeah.
Some situations require a very mind-centered approach to it, and others require a more body, heart-centered approach.
Mm.
I think what I've come to realize is that for small decisions, especially decisions of discipline,
Mm-hmm.
as well, I need to like kind of trust the logical side. For example, like when I wake up and I know, I got to go to the gym, right? But if I were to listen to kind of like my body and kind of like my gut feeling, I
Right.
just want to stay in the sheets. They have
Okay.
accepted me as one of
Yeah.
their own, like I am one of them now,
Exactly.
right? But then I kind of like for the small decision, I'm like, okay, no, but rationally, I know that I will feel better
Yeah.
after exercising, and so I
Okay.
make it like from that place. But I think
Mm-hmm.
in terms of big decisions, like big life stuff, I think it's important to work with, the heart. But yeah, what about for you? Like, how do you go about making your decisions, differentiating between like mind, body, making that connection? Like, what are some
Mm-hmm.
circumstances that you've applied that in?
I haven't had any big decisions like this recently, so it's a little hard to like to think about it, right? Um, but I think that like if I go into something knowing that like I want to trust my gut, then it's easy. I mean, like if that's what you're, and recently that's what I've been trying to do. Like at least take notice of it. You know what I mean? And not think so much and go. This is obviously whatever your initial reaction is probably the way you want to go. And then we start to rationalize things and decide. Um, but then there's times where it's like you actually need that. What you're talking about, coming back to school was one of those things for me where I didn't really want to. I'm very glad I did. If I would have just trusted like in the moment. There's also the third thing we haven't talked about, factor, which is like sometimes you can get just caught up in the moment of something and you need to take a step back. And that, you know what I mean? That's kind of the third thing. It's like there's your mind, there's like what you feel, and there's also like your current circumstance, I think, that's influencing how you're thinking about this that might not be actually accurate. For example, like what I was doing when I was working for my year off full time, and I was like, this is great. Like I haven't done music in a while. I don't really need to go back and do it and whatever. That's because that was my environment for like many, many months. I kind of pushed everything else away. And then when I finally removed myself from that and started doing it again, and I was like, oh no, like I'm glad I did this. And it wasn't that wasn't there. It was just I was so overwhelmed or overcome by the current environment. So to answer your question, I think it's. I'm not great at it either. I don't know. I think everybody has a challenge with it. It depends on. It really does depend on the situation, right? Like how big of a decision it is, because. But I mean, I guess you could also argue that like even big decisions, like just like choose something and go with it. And if you're able to just be okay with whatever you choose, I think that's where the problem steps in, or where you just make a decision, but you don't fully commit to the decision. I think a lot of us, me included, like do that a lot where it's like, okay, there's A and B, and I'm going to choose A. And then you start going down the path for A and you're like, wow, maybe like this would have been happening on the other side. And I should have done this. And I could, it's like, you've already made the decision. But it's so easy to just think about what could be, right? Because like you said, there's going to be good and bad on both. So you're going to start down path A and then be like, oh, this is the bad stuff. Well, it could have been better on B. But then you would have done the same thing on that side. So I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's just being aware that there will be bad parts and good parts to both if we're talking about two decisions, right? And to remember that, like, that's just like how many times in your life have you made decisions like every day, like hundreds and thousands of times probably, right? Like little decisions. So like we're good at it. We just can't get the brain involved, I think. Yeah, I don't know. That's what I think. It's a hard thing to comment on when I haven't had something recently that I've had to really think about. But I think it's just the commitment that a lot of us, everybody has a challenge with just naturally.
Yeah, totally agree. You also brought up something very interesting earlier, and like I kind of, speaking the same language as you, like understand that the vagus nerve is an important part about switching between our, sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, all the psychology of kind of like decision making. I'm really curious, like from like based off the things that like I'm someone who doesn't really know much about like kind of the gut body brain connection. Like what are some of the things that you've learned about that so far, because I know that the science behind that is really, really interesting. What are some of the things that you've learned or seen or could perhaps be impacting our decisions and we don't know?
Which is the food you eat is the main thing. I'm not gonna go like make a bold claim and say that all like depression and anxiety is caused by food, but I would say a large majority of it is at least enhanced by that because of this connection. There's also this thing called the blood-brain barrier, which I don't know too much about, but it's basically like a little membrane, and like certain bad types of food, if they leave your gut, which they can do with a thing called leaky gut, that bacteria can get up through that, connection. It can get up there and like get into your brain, which can cause things like depression or like all kinds of things that are like, people used to think, like doctors and like even psychologists and stuff, that those things were separate, right? Like there was that barrier and nothing could cross it, but it's incorrect. Where I think this is all like based on stuff I've learned, so I don't know 100%, but I don't think naturally it's supposed to have, like, there's not supposed to be that going back and forth, but because of the foods that we've eaten for so many years in our current society with like processed foods and so much sugar and all this stuff, it's for most people ruined that. So there is that kind of back and forth. So the more you eat of bad things, it's gonna go over there and vice versa. And so I would just say that that's the big thing is like if we ever have a deeper talk on any of this, it's like just you are the food that you eat, right? So it's like if you're gonna go have a fake piece of meat that did not exist before it went through 4 factories, you're like, that's not really natural, you know, like that's not, your body's gonna take in those chemicals and all that processed stuff, and it can affect things like that. So like that connection through your brain and your gut is very strong. So just something, at least a way to think about it. I don't even, again, know all the science, and if anybody's interested in this, which I encourage you to check it out, go check it out yourself. This is not like, I'm not a doctor, okay? So do not take my word like 100%, but that is a very real thing, that connection. And I think just having that perspective of like when you're eating food that like you are becoming what you're eating essentially, makes you think about things a little more, because it just affects you so much, right? So that's a little tangent to answer your
totally.
question.
You are what you eat, dude. You must have
Really,
eaten a whole bunch of good looking male goodness. We both must have eaten that. Woo! And same with you, viewers.
That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
We spread the love here.
Every
I
once
hope
in a while
y'all are
it's a
doing
comedy
good.
podcast for about 30 seconds.
It's always been a comedy podcast. Subscribe to Harrison King Official.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, there's all those things, you know, every part of our life, in all ways affects decisions and all those kinds of things. Everything's connected, right?
Yeah, and we're on a very in I guess interesting topic here, kind of the role of the body in making our decisions and how often we forego that in favor of overthinking and rationalizing and all these different things that ultimately cloud that. One thing that I've kind of learned through this, period of making decisions, and it's something I talked about kind of in my latest YouTube video. I wish I mentioned this, but how important kind of our physical, mental, and emotional state is to making our decisions.
Big
I think,
time.
the primary thing that I've learned is that when it comes to any decision, you first got to be grounded and present first. Kind of like that's the primary thing. I was kind of, whenever I'm making my own videos, I always kind of play kind of devil's advocate to myself. I'm like, okay, but that argument is actually like, I kind of like disagree with myself as I'm making it. And kind of one of the things that, devil's advocate Ameer was thinking was like, okay, this positive psychology, be conscious and be present, woo woo, is nice and all, but how am I going to make my decision?
Right.
Kind of thing is what, devil's advocate Ameer was saying. But then kind of like my response to that and what I learned through that is that no, your state of consciousness, your like estate, emotionally, mentally, physically, is the primary thing. Because I was also taking your recommendation and listening to like stuff from Joe Dispenza and everything as well. And like the thing is, if we're in a nervous, frantic, anxious state, then ultimately we're going to be making a decision from there, not from a place of power, not from a place of certainty or of like knowing that we can make things happen, but we're going to make a decision that reflects that state. Right. And so like how important it is to be here, be present, be grounded as we make the decision, focus on finding the peace within first, be okay kind of like with the outcome, accept the present moment and make the decision from there. And ultimately that's going to be something that's a lot more aligned,
exactly,
with life, with ourselves. And, I think alignment comes from being like in the present moment, listening to your body, listening to your gut, and, finding that peace and being still in it. What do you think?
I was gonna say, because you're kind of talking about, if you're in like a bad state, or I think it would be both. Like if you say like this is, average is like middle ground. There's like a middle line, and then like below that is when you're not feeling good or whatever, and or you're really frantic and thinking about something. Above that is when life's amazing. Both of those extremes are not really like great places to make decisions from, right? Because they're both gonna not be the average thing. So if you're like, even if you're feeling really great and things are amazing, you're gonna make a decision, go, yeah, like it doesn't matter, life's gonna be awesome, and then you come back to like your average resting state, and you're like, ooh, no, like I was wrong. You know what I mean? So I think it works both ways, which is what you're talking about. But I think coming back to being grounded, regardless of your state, even if it's super great or it's really bad, helps because there's that middle ground, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just more at peace to make your decision, and you're more coming from a place of clarity, right? As
Mm-hmm.
opposed to being influenced, like I said, by your environment, either good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm,
Mm.
absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, it's like the middle way, you know, it's like it's like this is like old school like Buddhist, you know, Buddhist thought, like the middle way. It kind of like reminds me like it's the middle path, kind of like the grounded emotional place, like it's like a triangle, right? So you have one extreme here of like, you know, crazy bad emotions. Viewers, if you're just listening, imagine kind of a triangle and I'm in like the bottom left half of it. Okay. So imagine a triangle, bottom left half. This is kind of a frantic, nervous, emotional state. On the other side, we have a really, really good, I can do everything kind of, you know, happy go lucky state, right? But the middle of that is actually a triangle, right? It's higher than both of them, like that,
Yes,
right? And so you're able to
that's
make a
great.
decision from that, you know, that higher place. I just love also that image, that
Yeah,
metaphor. And I think it's also important to delineate, while we're on the topic of this, it's important to differentiate between peace and happiness, right?
go
Inner
explain.
peace and joy, like joy arises from inner peace, right? And but inner peace is not always the same thing as happiness. Happiness is a emotion, right? It's a temporary feeling,
Hmm.
right? Whereas peace is kind of happiness is a temporary, I guess, emotion that arises from phenomenon, from surface level, you know, things that are happening kind of around us in our
Right.
circumstance, like, oh my god, this is such a lovely party, I'm so happy, or oh my gosh, I just got into this school, I'm so happy,
Mm.
that kind of thing, right? But whereas peace is more so unconditional, right, in the sense that being able to find peace whether you are watching a beautiful sunset or whether you are sitting, I don't know, like in a jail cell, right?
Hmm.
Is it possible to find peace in both scenarios? Yes. Is one easier? Obviously, right? But like peace is the one unconditioned, you know, the
Hmm.
unconditional peace, as one good book says, that transcends all understanding. You know, it's some really good, some really good book. It's called The Good Book, right? But you know, it's that peace that transcends all understanding, and like that peace that transcends all situations as well. I think that's the difference, is that happiness is dependent on the conditions, peace is dependent on none. And ultimately, that's where like a deeper abiding sense of acceptance and joy arises from. Not joy in the sense of, woo, oh my God, but
Yeah.
joy as in like a silent knowing, silent, present, body centered knowing. You get what
Hmm.
I mean?
Yeah. Weekly mantra from our resident monk Amir. That's what that was.
Yeah, exactly. I'm wearing my monk
Oh my,
vibes.
that's great. That's really good though. Like, and I know what you mean. Yeah, like peace can be found in any situation. But it's not easy. It's not easy to find. But if you're
Mhm.
able to, at least some form, I think like these things get funny for me because there's no like one. Like math. We know 2 plus 2 is 4. Everybody knows that. We can agree on that,
Really?
regardless of maybe everybody except Amir. Um,
I am a musician. Sorry, I can't
uh,
count past three. One, two.
yeah, that's it. Um, so we can, all agree on those things, but things like peace or whatever, like it's
Mhm,
different for everybody.
mhm,
So what I may consider peace would be based on my experience, and you may have
mhm,
experienced a greater level of peace that I haven't. So even between us, it might be different. Or we're talking about, it's the same thing like colors. Like we all of our eyes are different. So what I call green and what you call green, we may actually be seeing things, internalizing it
mhm,
differently. So it's like that with emotions too, right? I don't know if you ever thought about this, but even things like joy or happiness. Actually, there was a little while ago we heard from somebody that had, I think it was just like happiness or joy or something, that they had never experienced it before. They had
mhm,
it was some sort of, I don't know if it was a condition or something, but anyway, weren't able to actually experience it. And then once they were like, oh, like this is what I thought this was what happiness was, but I didn't realize that it was until it happened. So things like when we're talking about peace, I think it can be a challenging thing to discuss because there's people that,
mhm,
even including you and I, that may not have actually experienced that, but we think we have, you know?
mhm.
That's just a weird. I don't know. There's no answer to that. I've
Mm-hmm.
just it's a something to think about. It's
No,
very
totally. I love that
strange,
observation.
Mm.
Totally. I love that observation. And yeah, it reminds. Sorry, I'm getting a little too monkey here. To
No,
take me off the
no,
tangent. I'm on
it's
the
good.
treadmill.
It's
You
good.
know, but it like you're absolutely right. Right, we're it's a moving, well, not a moving metric, but it's actually no. The simple way to phrase it, it's like the opening line from the Tao Te Ching, which is like old Chinese like spiritual book of wisdom. Written thousands of years ago by Lao Tzu. The opening thing, it kind of talks about like the Tao, and the Tao translated into English is the way, the way, or like universal, whatever, like just life, universe, the Tao. And like the opening line from it, the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like that applies so perfectly kind of like to like this entire thing that we're talking about, like with peace and like these different states. Like if we can name it, or like if we can perfectly describe it, then that means we're kind of operating from a mind place, and we're not like truly knowing it and being it. Right. Does a dog know that it is a dog? Right. No, it just is itself. Right. Does a tree know that it's a tree? No, it's just being itself. And so I think when we're in a state of peace, like it's not necessarily like we're labeling it like, oh, I'm finally at peace now, but rather it's just being it. That's kind of the thought that it reminds me of, and what it brings to mind. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao.
Yeah, wow.
I don't know where where
that's
that
great though. Pulling out of nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. I've been really enjoying just like reading a whole bunch of like different texts and books and everything. Yeah, that's kind of where my headspace in my life has been at. Any cool recommendations from you, or thoughts, or I don't know, just take it.
That's really yeah, it's quite powerful, because I mean that's the essence of like that kind of outlook is like what meditation is focused around, right? Which is all that's connected, but and just being present, right? Mindfulness, where it's like if you're thinking about that you're doing it, you're not doing it, which is like the hardest thing you could possibly do on this planet, in my opinion, is like do something without not knowing you're doing it, but like you know you're doing it, but you're not thinking about that. Like it's just this weird like paradox, and I've always struggled with it. And there's like many times, like I'm coming up on a year, right, of meditating every day, and there's been like maybe 5 or like definitely less than 10 times where I've like really fully been in it, and not like I've actually been doing it, not thinking about it, and because there's always some aspect of it. So it's like I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges with all of this stuff. It's really hard. But because it's everywhere, like it's in what you just talked about, it's like the essence of Buddhism, essentially. You know what I mean? It's just getting to a place of peace, and it's just a focus, right? It's like it's an important thing, and I mean, I think probably all important things are challenging. But yeah, I don't know. I wish we had more answers sometimes to this stuff, but we always come back to these places. So I'm like, that's great. I just I can't tell you anymore, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, no, I totally agree with you. It is difficult. All this stuff is just kind of percolating and rising to my head right now. It reminds me of, I'm not sure if Naval said this or if he was quoting someone else, but he basically said, we say often that we want peace of mind, but really what we're looking for is peace from mind.
Yeah.
Right? Peace from the mind's worries, peace from kind of the labels, the anxiousness, the sadness. All these things are generated from the mind, not exactly the outer circumstance, but what we think about these outer circumstances. And what you say about like thinking and focus, right, and giving our full attention to the moment, it is difficult because like you're totally right. It's difficult because we live in an environment that is not conducive to that. We live in a really,
No.
we live in a society, but we, but we live in a society that is constantly trying to grab our attention and take it away from the present moment.
Yeah.
Right. Our phone
Yeah.
goes off. Boom. You're out of the present moment. Right.
Mhm.
You're, I don't know, watching a beautiful sunset. And then boom, you get a phone call, or, then you look down at your phone, Instagram. We live in a world that is constantly trying to take our attention, but really it's like, you're absolutely right. It requires that daily disciplined practice of like conditioning and focusing our attention to go like where we want it to be, whether that's in the body or in the present moment, which is essentially the same thing, right? It's a challenge because that's the world,
Do you think
kind
it
of
would
like managing
take
distractions.
Do you think it would take discipline if our environment supported it? Like, let's say you and I go and live in the rainforest for like 3 years, right? And on that, like when we get to the end of that, like, would we just naturally have come to that place? I don't know the answer, but like, it's a common thing, at least that I know of, that there's like there's like retreats, right? And like there's like monasteries, I believe that's the word, where they're like in the
monasteries,
mountains, right?
ashrams.
And there's nothing else around, and their sole purpose is to just like be. Do you think that if you and I, as people that have grown up in this environment and are doing this, and we're just to go somewhere like that and have like no distractions, I'm not taking anything really with me. We're gonna like build our space from scratch and like just survive and be there. Do you think that's a natural state and that we've kind of overridden it, or that you know where I'm going? Like, do you think that that's
Totally.
like our natural state and or
I'm picking up
society has
what you're
ruined it?
putting down.
Yeah.
I'm picking up what you're putting down, dude.
What do you think?
That's a really good question. I think the answer, it's a title of a book by John Kabat-Zinn. Wherever you go, there you are.
So you're
Right?
like a product of your environment. Is that what you're trying to say?
What I'm saying by this, like wherever you go, there you are. If we have our overthinking mind now, and we don't know how to kind of like tame the monkey mind, as it's commonly referred to. If we are unable to step into this place of fullness, to step into this place of being and feeling fully present now, then we're not going to feel it when we're you can change the environment to be as perfect and as silent and as still as you want it to be, but if the noise in the head is still going, wherever you go, there you are, then that's ultimately what you're going to carry around with you no matter what. And it is a common phenomenon that I've heard people talk about. Like, I'm not some like crazy spiritual guide or anything, but I've heard from other perhaps like spiritual or just mindfulness or meditation teachers that people will go on retreats, right? And then they'll have some spiritual awakening, and then they come back to the office and they start yelling at their employees.
Right.
Right. It's kind of like this dichotomy of like, wait, what? I thought I went to this retreat. I should be all good now. But really, the thing is, it's easy to be present in a monastery or an ashram. It's designed to be that, right? But the actual practice, like, we get stronger by lifting weights, right? We get stronger by challenging ourselves, right? And so being in this world that is kind of like seeking to distract us, take our attention away, right, is really like our practice. That is stronger training. If we're able to be like present and be fully here and mindful in the world that is trying to take our distractions away, kind of like going to a monastery or an ashram is going to be easy mode, right? And so basically, long answer short, I think it's predicated upon who we are and what we're doing and our state of consciousness now. If we're able to find that now, then, as I said three times, wherever we go, there we will be.
I agree. But I think that we would eventually start to adapt. Like, our environment does have an impact on us. So yes, it would take a long time. But I think that, like, if we're talking, weird science experiment, that's probably never going to happen. But like,
yet
you take somebody that's like super anxious, stressed out in an office job, and we pluck them from that and put them in this like natural environment where there's no like connection to this. There would be some weird psychological stuff that would happen, I'm sure. But like, no, you have none of the distractions of societal life. Where I think that eventually you would start to, your body would adapt and feel more comfortable. You wouldn't be checking your phone and watching TikToks and all this stuff that's caused like constantly all these distractions that we're having. If it's not there, then you would start to change. I think potentially we could get closer. But again, to answer my own question that I started with, I think that naturally we are able to be present and have this kind of sense of peace. And I think everything that's happened, maybe it's been evolutionary because when we introduce this stuff, but I'm talking like way back. I think that all these other things are environmentally, like it's been influenced by our environment. And I think that our current society is obviously the biggest problem because of advertising and blah, blah, blah. Everything's now, right? Not saying that you can't go back to it, but I think that just kind of cool to think about that we probably were originally there, because that's like everybody's always talking about how to get to somewhere. And it seems like a common thing with as humans that like, yes, we are trying to advance, but a lot of things is like we're trying to just scrape away all the stuff that our society is like, how it's worn us down and given us like bad traits. We're trying to remove those and go back to what was normal. Same thing with like health and these things I've talked about, right? Where it's like going to bed at whatever time. It's like clocks had a big impact on people's circadian rhythms because your body changes like every day, but the time doesn't change. So things like that, I think that's, we're always trying to get back to, in some way, what would be our natural state, which we will technically probably never know because of, we're just guessing, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah, totally. I do agree. I definitely do agree. I also do think that, like, if we were to take like said person, like put them out in the, a totally natural environment, like would they experience a shift? Absolutely, for sure. But the interesting thing about habit psychology, or at least what I've learned, is that like habits never really go away, right? They just get like, with less, they just get less maintained, so they're not as easy, right?
Right.
The I think, was it myelin sheath that forms along the neuron, right? It just wears down a little bit, so it's not as strong of a habit. But if you're absolutely right, we're products of environment. If you were to take that person who had like a spiritual awakening out in the forest, right, put them back into their office job, that emotional and mental habit is already established,
right,
it's
there.
But luckily, I think the difference in that case would be that, like, after having that like experience in the forest, like there would be at least some sense of awareness there. I was like, oh, the habit is starting again. And I think awareness is kind of the the thing that interrupts the habit, right? If you can be aware that, oh, I'm doing this repetitive behavior, then you can actually consciously decide, what do I want to repeat this pattern? Do I want to repeat this thought? Right.
Yes.
Ultimately, awareness creates the opening to make a decision. You also bring up an interesting thing, that I've also been I feel like I'm a friggin' like human library. My mind is just thinking of quotes and books.
It's good. It's great.
I'm so sorry. No, but it reminds me also of another passage, like I guess just from the Tao Te Ching. It's once again like, in dwelling, be close to the land, right? Follow kind of like the natural way of things, right? We can learn so much from nature and just the natural way in which things function, the natural ways that we're supposed to be eating, right? As you mentioned, the natural ways that we're supposed to be sleeping, our circadian rhythm, being close to nature, being close to the land. I think so much of the, I guess, wisdom, or like the solution to kind of our modern problems, is really just by going back to kind of our natural state.
Exactly. Yeah. You said that much simpler than I did.
Really, I felt like I'm kind of overcomplicating and adding in random quotes and stuff.
No. Yeah. There's a lot of, it's interesting. We've done whatever with, this is like the 7th thing we've done together here, conversation, and very commonly we come back to our current environment just being pretty terrible, like overall, which I know a lot of us like. We know there's a lot of things we don't like, but just as like originally like natural beings, and just the way I think our bodies and minds, like psychology, like we operate, I think that we've really messed up big time. And I know people, this isn't like a whoa revelation here, but it just, we continuously say like we're talking about vastly different things, but it always seems to come back to like, I mean, our environment influences us. How we live influences like everything that we do. And we're living based on our current circumstances, and it really is just not good, and it's hard to like think of a way to reverse that. Like you can, yes, start with your own environment, whatever, but to like big change is going to take a long time, and it's worrisome that like are we, I know people spend their whole lives on this topic, right? And doing things about it, but it's like, are we too far gone? Like, can we even reverse this and get back? Like, will we make ourselves extinct? Not from like climate change and all that stuff, separate from that. Like, will we just not be able to function because we've gone too far from what we were supposed to do? You know what I mean? Like, with the advances in technology and all these things, which are great, don't get me wrong. But it's like, even you and I, like, are we really meant to be sitting here having a conversation with microphones over a computer screen? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's definitely benefits to it, but in the long term, like how bad are these things? So I don't know. It's interesting. I think that took a dark turn there, but that just make me, think of, it's something we keep thinking about and coming back to. It just makes me realize that that's really, yes, we can do stuff ourselves, but like as a population, species, we need to like focus
As
on
a society.
as a society. Exactly. Like this is a big issue, which I know will like probably not be addressed for a long time, if ever, but it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I've been thinking about this a lot as well. I'm curious, what do you think? Kind of like my conclusion, or well, not conclusion, because I'm, my mind is always open to, changing these things, but kind of like my current thought kind of on this and like the society and the world that we've created with technology and everything, like, does it have its problems? Oh, for sure, definitely, definitely, there's a whole bunch of issues that we've created for ourselves. And at the same time, I also think it's kind of like the best alternative that we have. I think kind of what I've realized, like, in just watching, and just watching like a lot of like historical documentaries and just kind of like, or documentaries on like, hunter gatherer tribes and stuff, like life back then was hard as hell, right? So kind of having to go and fetch water from the river,
Right.
having to like watch your back as you're walking back from the river so you don't get eaten by like a predator or something, right? Having to go run and hunt and, stay up in the night, having to find fire and shelter and warmth, and like life was really, really hard back then. We had to do so much work back then, and that was kind of the cost of it, right? Short lifespans, long back-breaking work. And I think kind of, what we have right now as a society is not perfect, but I feel like it's the best alternative that we have kind of to that way of life that's so tremendously difficult. I think one thing I've realized for myself, and I'm not sure, if this is for other people, if, perhaps you might resonate with this as well, but for myself, what I've noticed, having grown up kind of in the 21st century urban environment in beautiful Vancouver, I kind of have this idyllic view, or I used to, well, sometimes still do, but I kind of have this like super idyllic view that nature is, a lovely, wonderful place to live in, and like the deers are,
Right.
just
Meadows everywhere.
meadows everywhere, right? But kind of like recognizing that that's just my, metropolitan view of nature, when really our life kind of back then, in kind of our natural state was hard as shoot.
Yeah.
Was hard as shtick. So it was. I think kind of what we have right now is, it's imperfect, but I feel like it's our best alternative.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Like we're constantly growing and evolving as a society. How many times can we use that word? We need like an accountant.
We are in a society.
Yeah, like it's the best. It's the best that we have. So like, not everything's obviously gonna be perfect. The longer that we continue to change things, it's like stuff gets better, right? We'll eventually figure it out. So no, it's interesting. Whoa, my brain stopped there for a second. It's interesting. It's interesting to think about, are we like you said, like there's many things that are way better, obviously. What's overall, is it the right direction? It doesn't really matter because we're here, so we're not going to change it. But it's neat to think about, if things would have gone another way, how would it look, and what would be the case. But
I have a question for you, out of curiosity, if you could if you were the president of the world, Harrison King, king of the world,
Okay.
if you were president of the world or something, and kind of like you could create a living situation that was kind of like, that would be best, that would kind of like be the best solution. Like what would that be for you? What would that look like? And obviously, like
It-
no one has
yeah.
the answers, but
Of
just
course.
having
Of
fun here,
course.
like what
Yeah.
would that, I guess, perfect natural like way of life look like for you?
Well, I guess it depends on like, are we taking the current like all the countries, you know what I mean, and
Mm,
people have different cultures and all these things, or is it like one blanket thing? Because I'll go the blanket route. So we'll
yeah,
say that
you
like
decide. Yeah.
everybody, because it's too complicated otherwise.
Mhm.
Um, I think we would have to come from a place of teaching children from a young age, like obviously basic things, how to live and like we do. But the education system, quote unquote education system, I wouldn't call it like it'd be like a decentralized thing, just like a rules or whatever values that based on all these books and things you're talking about and what we've learned like seem to be the best ways. It's not like coming from a place of this is my ego, I want to take care of you. There's a whole book by her name's Elisa Song. I don't remember the name of the book, but she was on a podcast I was working on, so I listened to it. Really interesting. This is a little side topic, and she was just saying how like in like I believe it was, I want to say African tribes that they were studying, where like the way that they treat their children, again that may not be it, but at least something similar, that their kids are very like they just kind of do what they like, they sort things out, like they're not parenting. Helicopter parenting doesn't exist.
Mhm.
There's fires and there's all these things happening, but like they're like, well, if the kid goes and touches the fire, they're never going to do it again because they're going to go, wow, that hurt, that burnt my hand. You know what I mean? Instead of you telling them never touch it, never touch it, never touch it, and then they eventually like it's that thing. So that would be a place to start. It'd be like everybody kind of sorts out things on their own, but I think the priority would be like what we're talking about, like meditation and mindfulness has to be a big part of society, which it's not in a lot of cultures it is, but like we're talking about like our kind of quote unquote civilized society, western,
Mhm.
western
Yeah,
culture
in our
has like
Western North
seeped
American.
into
Mhm.
everywhere though, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of it's bad. Coming from that place and raising people from a sense of, because I'm starting to think, well, there's always going to be somebody that's bad, so like how do you deal with that? That's why we have jail and whatever. I'm like, I think if we can somehow raise people to believe that the way to live is just to like treat others well and find inner peace and whatever. Obviously there's exceptions and this is a whole theoretical thing, and what
Mhm.
there's
Of course.
whatever.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
that would be the starting place and almost everything would be good after that. Like I think everything else that comes with that, like talking about all the problems, if I were to say, because I'm like, let's remove currency, as in like you have to work for somebody else to have, I know like trading and stuff, it's like a form of currency and all this. It's like if people aren't gonna learn even how to be greedy because they're raised in a way that they don't even understand what that is and they would never do it, like stealing and stuff is not going to be a problem. So then just like all of those problems I think would be solved from this place, and that's my answer. That's a pretty relatively simple answer, but I genuinely think that would solve a lot of problems if we were to start a society from the ground up based on that. Almost everything in my opinion would kind of work out in a good way. I don't know.
Mhm. Totally agree. And also, everyone listening, y'all are smart enough to know that there's nuance to every answer, to
Yes, of
every
course.
aphorism. So we're figuring this
No,
out
no, no.
just as
What
much,
I said is the
Yeah.
absolute truth and
Absolute
nothing.
truth. Yeah. The subscribe to Harrison King.
Oh my God.
Subscribe to every thought of Harrison King.
This adds a bubbly ad. This whole
Yeah. This whole
I hope
podcast.
they could sponsor us one time, guys. I love
Sponsorships.
this. I was talking to Amir before. If you're not on the video, you can't see, but I've got grapefruit bubbly. Bubbly is sparkling water, at least in Canada. I don't know if they have it elsewhere. And and I was like, I used to see people drink it, and I was like, what are you doing? Like it's like soda or something. It's not. It's just water. It's just carbonated water and natural flavoring, and the flavors are great. And there's literally nothing in it. It's just like it's like if you put strawberries in water and then drank it. That's what it is.
While
I'm
you're
sure.
talking about that, you're reminding me I need to get some water. Keep
Okay, you go
talking
do
to
that.
him. Yeah.
Um, I'm sure there's something wrong with, drinking water out of a can that was like in a factory. And I know there's like, that's probably not the best, but it's great. And if you like bubbly things, sparkling things, get some, try some. This is not a sponsored ad, but maybe one day will be. So if anybody knows anybody at Bubbly, get them to reach out to us.
And dear viewers, that is your reminder to stay hydrated wherever you are. Please make sure that you're staying hydrated. Take a sip of water.
Very important.
Or Bubbly. They're not sponsoring this. Well, hopefully one day they do.
I said maybe in the future,
Yeah, maybe.
Manifestation. That's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. To be honest, like I'm feeling like I'm out of thoughts. Like this is a lot. We covered a lot of stuff today. It's great though. It's great.
Totally. My brain is still rolling and roaring, but we could save it for next time.
Amir could go for another 3 hours and he'd be like,
I totally
quotes
could.
for days.
I know, right? It's because I went to my therapist today. My brain is clear. I'm grounded. I'm here.
I love it.
It's sunny in Vancouver.
That's good. The weather has such a big impact though on our mood. That's a whole different conversation. But like definitely. It started to get like spring has finally arrived, kind of. It's gone back and forth. And then the sun comes out and it's kind of warm enough that I can go outside for a walk and check this and make myself sound super Canadian in a bunny hug.
Oh wow.
And it's like I just feel so great. I'm like, wow, like I'm back, I'm alive again. It's great. So that's a different maybe that's we talk about.
It's weird. Indwelling be close to the land, my dude.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. The weather is so nice here in Vancouver. Anyways, dear listeners, thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode. We hope that you've taken something great from this. We hope that, you're able to apply something, that you're able to go out and be present, in your life, go out and live your life. And, as Harrison always says, we're learning to live for the first time.
Exactly. Have a conversation like this with somebody else. See what what would they do if they were there? How would you fix the world if you had it's an interesting question. Not in don't do it in you can't do it in a greedy way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's an interesting thing to think about. So there you go. That's your homework, listeners. Very good. Amir, where can the people
your
find
second, you? Yeah, of course. Everyone can find me at Ameer Corro, AmeerCorro, everywhere you get the internet. What about you, Harrison?
Harrison King Official on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and that's my website too, which I got to update. Maybe I'll work on that at some point. Very good. Thanks for the chat, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Peace out.
Listeners. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the show, make sure to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Visit us on Instagram and TikTok at Let's Talk About Life Pod. And for more information, head on over to harrisonkingofficial.com/podcast. Now it's time for you to get out there and have a deep, meaningful conversation in your own life.